My God, I've missed that theme tune. I feel like I've not heard it for ages. Listen, welcome to the Tunnel Podcast. We're back, episode 27. We're racking them up. And we're back, obviously, it's the Nations League. So, plenty to chat about. Loads and loads of talking points. Some not Nations League related, but we'll end on them. A couple of bits to get through before that. Delighted to say I'm joined by a couple of familiar faces, Tom Goff and Connor Chalmers. Tom, how are we doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate.
You're looking like badly drawn boy tonight, mate. With that hat and the beard.
Well, no, I'm having a bit of a bad hair day, mate. So I thought I'd stick the beanie on. All right.
Okay, no worries.
Head
and shoulders tomorrow, is it, in the bath?
That's
is it,
mate? Yeah, I'm due a wash, mate. It was a bit greasy, so yeah, I'll stick this on top of it.
And a man who's not having a bad hair day, Connor, you're looking very sloppy.
No, certainly not having a bad hair day. But then, to be fair, Tom has already had the beginnings of a burgeoning television career, so he's obviously got to keep the image up. That's what's got to happen there. But all good. International football is upon us once again, and yeah, as much as I'm looking forward to getting into this, there is a slight bit of international football fatigue that I'm starting to feel. I must admit.
Well, listen, as I say, plenty to chew through. We'll start with England. There's been a lot of talk about the 8 withdrawals, all kind of high profile. If you haven't seen them, I'll quickly rattle through. Trent Alexander-Arnold, Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, Cole Palmer, Declan Rice, Saka, Colwill and Aaron Ramsdale as well, to name the 8. There's been a lot of talk about this, a lot of fallout, Tom. We kind of spoke coming into this about the big piece that kind of broke yesterday from the Sun's Charlie Wyatt. You knew it would come from the Sun, didn't you? And the Mirror's John Cross, who loves his international football. They were saying this wouldn't have happened under Gareth Southgate's stewardship. Gareth Southgate got the players kind of bought into turning up for international duty. And that kind of maybe falls into what the captain said, which we'll touch on later. What do you think is culminated in this? Is it something to do with the man in charge at the moment and the fact that we've got a kind of interim, or is it the fact that Connor said there's just too many matches at the moment and we're coming into a kind of business end, or a busy end, should I say, of the festive period of Premier League games?
Yeah, I personally think it's a combination of a lot of things, to be honest with you, mate. I've seen the interview with Wyatt and Cross. We had a little chat earlier, and then I watched it back a couple of times, obviously to find out what was said. And yeah, I think they seem to be pointing the finger kind of directly at the FA, and they were even kind of pointing the finger at Tuchel, which I thought was incredibly strange. I thought, how on earth has he had any say? And then what like you said, what's happened in the last kind of few days with all these players dropping out of the squad. But yeah, I think the point about Southgate, I personally think Southgate being the permanent manager, and he was obviously in the position for a long time. I think there probably was a bit of fear there, I guess, from the players in that. There was a couple of incidents, and I think the most high-profile one was Ben White, wasn't it? Where he said that I think it was, I don't know whether it was the Nations League or some international friendlies or what it was, but Ben White decided that he didn't want to be part of the England squad for whatever reason, and that was it, wasn't it? Southgate pretty much said, well, you cut your ties, you're not going to be getting in this squad whilst I'm in charge. So it does sound like Southgate kind of was quite strict when it come to giving players the opportunity, and then if they chose not to take it, then that was it. Which, to be honest, I do agree with that to an extent. I think we're going to touch on Harry Kane and what he's been saying, but I do think playing for your country is a massive honour. And you should only be saying no if you are genuinely injured and you cannot turn up to training and play the games. But I think there's a lot more factors in play now, and I think that the main one being this ongoing discussion about the amount of games these players are having to play. It just seems to be increasing as every season passes, at a club level and an international level as well. And I think you have to take that into consideration as well. You know, when looking at this, you know, this situation and kind of making a decision, I guess, on, you know, who you agree with and who you don't and so on. It's a tough one. It's a tough one because I kind of agree with little bits of what a lot of people are saying about all the different points. You know, I don't want to be one of these who sits on the fence. You know, I know I am sitting on the fence a bit here, but I do. You know, I've been reading up quite a bit today. You know, on what's you know, what's been said and what, you know, discussions that are being had and who's dropped out and the potential reasons why and so on. But yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to kind of hear what you guys think about it, because I kind of get why the players are dropping out, because, you know, we've spoke many times on this pod about the Nations League and, you know, the kind of the what's the word I'm looking for?
Prestige that it's holding at the moment.
Prestige, that's perfect, mate. Yeah, the lack of prestige it has, and, you know, the actual, you know, the players actually wanting to take part of it, you know, and be called up and represent their countries in it. I think for some countries, it's not all countries, but I think for some countries, and it tends to be the kind of more high profile, you know, international teams with bigger squads. It's kind of, it seems to be losing its prestige kind of as time goes on. And yeah, I personally think that is the main reason as to why this kind of situation is unfolding. Is I just do think that the players are playing too many games of football. They're not being listened to. And, you know, they've got to think about their careers. You know, they've got to think about, you know, fatigue and burnout, and they're having to prioritize when, you know, that shouldn't be the case. They should be able to kind of, you know, cover all bases and play club football and international football. But the amount of fixtures that are piling up now, they're not being able to do that. And, you know, the Nations League and the kind, like we've touched on, the prestige and you know, the value of it, etc. Obviously, some of those players have seen it and thought, you know what, I am a bit maybe run down after the last batch of games. I could do with a little bit of a break. I don't quite fancy it. Undoubtedly, I think some of them have made that call. I'm not saying all of them. I think probably some of them have got some knocks and injuries, but I think 8's too big a number to say you've all got an injury that warrants you not being part of this squad. So, apologies, mate. I've gone on a bit there. I hope it made sense, and it was, you know.
Yeah, Connor, I'll come to you because he makes a point there about the 8. 5 of the 8 are in, you know, teams that are going for the title in Arsenal, Man City, and Liverpool. Do you think the clubs have had an influence here, or is it what Tom says? Is it actually player power now sort of flexing its muscle?
Yeah, there's possibly a bit of both involved. I certainly think it's more player power flexing its muscle than anything else. And I think the thing is as well, you know, you have to look at the individual circumstances of each of the players who've dropped out also, because I think that's important when you're looking at the context of the whole thing. I mean, look at Bukayo Saka, for example. He's not long come back from an injury layoff for a few weeks there for Arsenal. And so, quite rightly, his thought and the club's thought is probably, well, if he's just came back to us the last couple of games from an injury, does he really want to risk himself going on international duty where he might still not be necessarily fully fit yet? You know, why would you risk that? And so he is someone who thinks he has a right to do that. Declan Rice is the same. I think the thing you've got to remember is that I understand the importance of international football. And listen, I love international football. I think all three of us do. And I'm very passionate about it. But at the same time, there is getting to a stage where I think the players are, as Tom said, feeling like they're not being listened to, that they're playing too many games, that the international breaks keep coming up. And the problem that it creates as well is that it's stop-start when it comes to the domestic season. And that's an issue if you're an Arsenal or a Man City, particularly at a time like this for both those clubs where they've started to stutter a little bit with results. Man City have just lost 4 games in a row. First time that's ever happened to Pep Guardiola in his career. Arsenal as well, also having their own struggles. You know, they're not picking up wins at the moment. They drew at the weekend with Chelsea. They lost the week before, and I think the week before that as well. And so they, from a club perspective, those players would be desperate to get back on the pitch in club colours to go out there and right some of those wrongs. And from the point of view of other clubs, like my own at Newcastle, for example, you've just started a good run of form. You've won 3 games in a row. You're building momentum, and bang, it's halted straight away because you've got to go into this next international break. And I think there's a frustration there amongst not just the players, but the fans as well around that. And that's why you're seeing it. Look, I do think if you're going to have this many international breaks, is there any harm, particularly if you're a nation as big as England and you've got the luxury of such a wealth of talent to pick from? Is there any harm in not picking the same players every time? Because these kind of international breaks aren't your qualifiers. These aren't qualifiers for a World Cup. These aren't massive games. You can afford to tinker around the edges and go, you know what, I'll pick 5 or 6 different players this time and give them a chance. Especially when you're playing, what would be perceived, from England's point of view, lesser teams to them. Why wouldn't you give that a bash? Listen, if it doesn't work, that's fine. That's one thing. You can then review that. But I don't think when you've got such a big pool to choose from as England do, that you need to pick the same players every single international break and expect them to do it. That might be different for like us, Robert, Scotland. We're not as big, so our pool is smaller. But you could probably still change 1 or 2 players in there if you wanted to. So I think that's something they need to look at, as well as, do we need to have Nations League taking place every year? I've said it before in this show. I think they should be biannually and do it the year before the Euros, because it's the only international tournament it has any bearing on. Gives you a playoff spot. World Cup, it means nothing.
Listen, I agreed with you. You said it first time, and I agree with you now. I think that's something that needs to be spoken about, and it would really help sort of lighten the load as such. It might be a sort of an offering they could give to the players should it come to that. Tom, look, the captain's come out, as you kind of mentioned, the opening gambit, and he's kind of throwing shadow over the guys that have withdrawn, said he's a little bit disappointed. He kind of then, backed Gareth Southgate as well and what he'd built over the last 8 years, and, how much it meant to turn up to England. And he came out and said, it's England before club, which I thought was a really bold statement from him. It sounds like that's his words as well. It's not like he's been fed a line. It's came from the captain himself. So what did you kind of make of that and the way he's came out hard?
Yeah, he has, mate. I was, I'm a little bit surprised about it. Look, I tell you what, I don't think there's enough of footballers out there kind of giving their opinion on things nowadays. So I think, on the one hand, I'm going to applaud him a bit in, coming out and saying what he thinks, because it could have been really easy as the England captain to just have given, a real vanilla response, like you said, that's been handed to him by some, press bod within the England camp, try and avoid getting in any sort of debate about this, just give a really kind of basic standard response about it. No, he's given his opinion, and that, you can tell with Harry Kane, because I've joked about it in the past, haven't I, that like he wants to play even if he's like 60% fit. Like, he obviously very passionate for playing for England. He's the captain, and you can tell that obviously means a lot to him, and I like all that about it. I just think, and what we've just been discussing there, I think, and he hasn't touched on the things that are definitely factors as well, which we've just spoken about the games, this issue with the matches and the amount of matches these players are having to play, and which is probably the main reason as to why some of them have decided to drop out of this squad. I'd like to be a fly on the wall the next time those guys that have dropped out are back together in the dressing room with Harry Kane, because we are just kind of making assumptions here. Like I've just said, I think it's very unlikely that all 8 of those guys have got serious enough injuries to drop out the squad, but some of them most likely have. So it's kind of intriguing to see, well, who's he kind of directing that towards, because like you said, it's questioning their integrity, isn't it? They are quite strong words. I don't know whether he meant them to, because sometimes I don't want to sound too harsh on Harry, but whether he looks back on it and thinks, maybe poor choice of words there, maybe I did come across too strong, we'll never know. But
he seems to me as a man who takes his captaincy, seriously, and I dare say he'll have had conversations with a few of these guys before making that comment. I do.
Yeah, but that's fair enough. But then what I'd be surprised at is that he's kind of just come out and fired, that's his angle, that's his take, and he's not taken into consideration what we've been discussing. He knows full well, the amount of games some of those guys have played, the toll it's taken on him already in this such an early stage of the season. They're playing league football, they're playing cup football, they're playing Champions League football and international football already, and we're only in November. I bet you look at some of those guys that have dropped out, I bet you they've played a ridiculous amount of games, some of them already, and we're not even
off the back of the Euros as well, where they went
off
all
the
the
back
way.
of the Euros as well. That's an absolutely fantastic point. Off the back of the Euros, they've had no break, gone straight into the season. So that's why I'm a bit like, it's a bit like you said, it's strong really, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's upset a few of those guys. Like I said, I think fair play to him. He's come out, he's said, the thing I like about it is what he said about representing your country, whether it's country before club. I don't know. I'm not too sure about that, but what he is bang on about is that it's an absolute privilege to play for your country, and it shouldn't be an afterthought, and it shouldn't be a case of whether you feel up for it or not, but I think he's just kind of missed a little bit in that, there's more, like that rant I went on at the start, there's more things at play here simply other than just players thinking, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit knackered, got a little bit of fatigue. I've played a lot more game. I think there's more to it than that, than players just thinking, yeah, I can't be bothered. I'm going to give this one a miss. I don't think it's as straightforward as that, which is kind of the brunt of what he's saying.
Connor, it looks like it's come from maybe a more extended interview with Gabriel Clark that we might see tomorrow night before the game. However, where do you sit on it? Is it bravery from Harry Kane, or is it stupidity? Where do you kind of sit with it?
Well, I mean, yeah, I dare say you're right. It will have come from a more extended interview, and we'll see it probably in the build-up to the Greece game tomorrow, which is almost certainly the bigger game for England, because I think who wins that probably tops the group. But I think he's given him the headline, and this is for me. There's a bit of naivety in it if you for the captain of England to do that, especially at a time like this for England, because Lee Carsley's on his way out the door. This is his last couple of games in charge, and then Thomas Tuchel will come in January. Harry Kane, very much still the most experienced head in camp in terms of a senior figure at the top level, and I just don't see why he might personally feel that for him, country above all, it's more important than club. And that's his right. He's entitled to think and feel that if he wants. But he can't just enforce that view on all the other players, because they might not all feel that way. I'm sure it will be an honour for those players to play for England. It'd be an honour for any of us to be asked to play for your country. The issue is, and around the wider context, is that it's not being made to feel like a privilege for these players anymore. It's being made to feel like a chore because of how regularly it's happening. Part of that honour and prestige of playing for your country is how special it feels, because it doesn't come around often, and how hard you've got to work to get that call up. So you might get a call up and it's an honour, but you might not get another one for another year or another 2 years or whatever, because it used to be when the international breaks were roughly quarterly, that you knew that you only had one opportunity every few months or so. Now it's so different that I think you have to take that into account. I don't know if he's had conversations, as you say, Robert, he might have done with some of the guys beforehand. I'd like to think he has with one or two of them, because if he's not, that'll be an awkward camp when they come back in the door again. But what was that you're saying there, mate? Sorry, you got a problem? So I think he might have been best slightly keeping his powder dry on that one and being a bit more diplomatic about it. But it's his opinion and he's entitled to it. I personally, I'm with Tom. I'm not sure in the idea of country versus club kind of thing. I don't, I wonder, and maybe this is me, just totally speculating and throwing things in there. But I wonder if Harry Kane would still feel that country was more important than club if he was still playing for Tottenham and trying to challenge for a league title there, because we all know how much he cared about his time and loved Tottenham. He was ingrained at that club. I don't think he's got. I think he loves Bayern Munich, but I don't think he's got the same personal investment in Bayern Munich that he did Spurs.
All I was just going to quickly jump. Yeah, I've kind of just said a lot better than I was trying to say. I agree with all of that. I think the only thing I was just going to say, he's in a difficult situation, Kane, because what the issue we're talking about is a bigger problem, and we're talking about the governing bodies of football here. Who the FA are obviously part of, or involved in. And he can't really sit there and start hammering into them. I think that what he said about the players is probably the only moan he could have. Do you know what I mean? And whether he's gone about that the right way and he said the right things, we'll see. But I think just to kind of give him a little bit, is that it'd be difficult for him to sit there and just start hammering into the whole institution and all these issues that we're talking about. And I'd like to think, like you've just said, him chatting with the players, which I think he would have done because he's a good captain. Like you said, a lot of experience. He's obviously well respected within the camp. I'd be very surprised if he hasn't spoken to some of them. They probably would have relayed these concerns to him. That I'm playing so many games and I've got a bit of a knot. Maybe I could have, but I've taken the decision not to. And this conversation as a group about how many games they're playing is getting too much, etc. He must be aware of that. Some of these guys have come out in the press themselves, haven't they, and said these things. So he is aware of that, I think. But then, like Connor said, which I think was a great point, I think he has been a little bit, and like you said, Rob, we'll see maybe more of it tomorrow. And they've taken out a snippet that's, like you said, that's going to get the headlines, and there might be much more to it. But it does seem, I think, like he has been a little bit naive in what he says, because it isn't as straightforward as maybe he's kind of
he's
making
such
it
an
out to be a bit.
experienced guy. He should know with the press that don't they're going to take that headline out of it. And yes, we'll see the full context, no doubt, tomorrow night. But he has to know the first thing that's going to come out for that is that, and clearly that's. I also think as well, he's got to look at it's taking a toll on his body as well, which he knows, because we've all said he's been half a yard off it for England recently. And I don't know, the only part that stands out to me that I have a bit of a real dislike for is the part when he refers to Gareth Southgate saying that England's the most important thing you play, and Southgate wasn't slow to make decisions if that drifted away from players. I don't like that, because that almost sounds like he's implying some of these players might not get picked up again because of that if Southgate was in charge, which I don't think is fair. I'm not saying he is saying that, but that's how he comes across when you make that point.
It almost as well as having a bit of a dig at Carsley that he's running a bit of a slack ship. Do you know what I mean?
I think he was maybe, which leads me into a quickly point just about Tuchel that we mentioned. Is it a mistake not just getting him in straight from the off? Because we've now got this scenario where players are thinking, oh well, it's only Carsley. We'll get the Nations League out the way and I'll be back under the real manager when the World Cup qualifiers come along.
Yeah, I'm not. I know I've seen that kind of being thrown around a bit. I personally don't agree with that, and I think that for whatever reasons unknown, this decision has been made for Tuchel to come in, obviously at the start of the year, and for Carsley to oversee. These are the last two games, aren't they? That he's going to oversee the last squad. I don't believe for 1 minute that Tuchel hasn't had some sort of involvement, some sort of introduction. even if it's just to kind of Carsley and the guys that are in charge at this moment in time, just to kind of, first and foremost introduce himself, but to also say, like, just kind of keep doing what you're doing. But obviously I'm watching the games. I wouldn't be surprised if, training's getting filmed and everything, as of now, for him to kind of look back on and everything. Those players have got to be pretty stupid to think, Tuchel doesn't start in January, so I'm just going to take my foot off and, like, can't be arsed with this squad. Like, it'll be all good. He's going to see who's dropped out, and he's going to, there'll be reports back to him as to why they've dropped out and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not too concerned about that. I do think that, like you said, the bigger question is, I don't understand why he just hasn't been brought in straight away, because, like, we've talked about the Nations League and, the prestige of it and, what's at stake. Well, there isn't much at stake, really, is there? So why couldn't he have just been brought in, and just cracked on from the off, all right? Maybe we would have seen a couple of poor results because he hasn't had that much time on the training pitch and, he's getting to know players and all the rest of it. But still, I don't think anyone would have, everyone would have seen it that, well, he's new in the job and it's going to take a bit of time for him to work with the players and to get his ideas across and all the rest of it. That's the. But we don't know. I don't know. I don't know if you guys have seen anything as to the reason why he's not starting until January. Any sort of statement as to why that's the case or anything.
The FA were banking on obviously winning this Nations League group and it being tied up in a little bow for Lee Carsley. However, if they finish second, Tuchel's first games are going to be in the playoffs, aren't they? Which I think are just before the World Cup qualifiers. So it's not panning out, how the FA probably wanted it to. Add to that, if Tuchel had been in the dugout tomorrow night, maybe a couple of those guys that have got knocks might have gone through the pain barrier. Because I thought, look, I don't want to miss out on the first game under the new gaffer. So it does throw up some questions, Connor, in that regard, as to, why wait? You're leaving yourself open to criticism if they don't get the result tomorrow in Athens.
Well, absolutely right. And it's bizarre because, he's not in a job right now. He's been out of a job since May. Well, June, technically, if you count that as the end of the season. But since the end of last season when he left Bayern Munich. I can't think of any reason that makes any sense in my head why you don't just bring him in straight away. Particularly, let's be honest here, without wishing to sound too harsh on Lee Carsley, but looking at the last two games they had in the Nations League, even if you look at this campaign as a whole in the Nations League under Carsley, it hasn't been that great from England. They've had a couple of good results. You can't deny that. Yes, they beat Finland quite resoundingly twice. Fair enough, but let's be fair, Finland are a bang average team at best. They went to the Republic Island in the first game and got a 2-0 win, but on another day, if Ireland had taken a couple of chances, that would have been a bit more sticky than it ultimately was in the end. And then, of course, Greece coming to Wembley and winning, which sets up the big tie tomorrow that will be a winner-takes-all type of thing. And I think you've got to say, when you look at that and you look at those performances, it's not even as if you could go, well, look, Carsley's earned the right to stay and to at least see out this campaign. He's not. And he won't see out the campaign, as you say, Robert, because if they finish second, then Tuchel has to come in straight into playoffs. So I don't quite grasp why they've made the decision. And it does leave the door open, as Tom says, to these questions being asked. And they're going to be, I think the problem as well for the FA is that they've got a fairly extensive history of bizarre decision-making when it comes to the England job. And I think that's probably just another thing for people to go, well, hold on. And I don't know, has Tuchel himself, is he the one that said, well, actually, I'll come in, but I'll come in January, And to Tom's point as well, he's right. This idea that these players are doing it because Tuchel's not there, I don't think makes much sense because he will know all about it. I imagine that maybe not tomorrow because it's in Greece, but on Sunday, when Ireland rock up to Wembley, I'm pretty sure Thomas Tuchel will be in the crowd somewhere watching that game. I'm positive because I don't know what else he'll be doing. Like I say, he's out of luck. Maybe he's getting interviewed to the match of the day, who knows? But, so yeah, he'll see it. He'll see what happens. And of course, the risk for some of these players that left out, if he's sitting in the crowd and he sees a few things he likes with some of the lads that come in, that might all of a sudden put serious competition on your spot. So I don't think it's anything. I don't think them not play the players pulling out is anything to do with Tuchel, but I do think he should be in the door already. I just don't know why he wouldn't be.
Okay, listen, there is a game tomorrow night as we're discussing, so and quite a big one, Tom. You know, we done the watch along for the Greece game at Wembley. You had all the George Baldock sort of stuff kicking around, and maybe that was used as an excuse for Greece winning. But I think that's a bit of a disservice. They were good on the ball. They were really good off the ball, I felt, as well on the night. I don't think anyone can complain that they won that game in the end. They had the better of the chances that evening. This isn't going to be an easy tie for Lee Carsley. You know, looking at the guys that have come in, I saw today Jared Braithwaite sort of trained on his own. You know, another kind of Luke Shaw Euros kind of scenario, which seems to bizarre to me. Just because, you know, I thought it was conning yourself. Someone said about Saka carrying an injury. Surely you have that conversation before you pick the squad. Sure, you say to these guys, look, I know you're carrying an injury. Are you good to go or not? Don't bring them in and then let them leave. That's bizarre to me. Anyway,
I always find that really baffling. Is like you said, these squads are announced, and then almost instantly,
they're
or like
leaving.
in a couple of days, it's like, oh, well, these guys are left. And it does happen. It seems to happen with England more than not, but it happens with other countries as well. And you're like, well, hold on a minute. Surely you're ringing through to find out if these guys are fit and available and ready to go.
The only thing I can think of is that the England club doctor is insisting on examining these players themselves.
Oh, okay,
it's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah.
But just in terms of one quite exciting bit of news I felt was one of the guys coming in, Morgan Rogers. He seems to be a player that's just, you know, trajectory's fantastic. You know, I think it was at Exeter or was it Lincoln? One of the two.
Well, he started at West Brom, mate. He's from our academy.
Oh no! You let him go.
No, we didn't let him go. I'll tell you what happened. Man City bought him off us when he was about 16, and we got about 3 million, 3.5 million for him, because Man City could obviously see his potential. We were devastated because I think he currently holds the record for youngest senior appearance. So I remember I was at the game when he come off the bench at West Brom. Yeah, so he came on when he just turned 16, came on as a sub for West Brom, and obviously everyone was waxing lyrical about what he was doing in our youth ranks. So that's where he come from, mate. So you've probably seen the interviews and stuff. He's obviously a Brummy lad, like, so he's from the Midlands. But he went to Man City, and then from Man City, he had a few loan spells. But yeah, I think it was when he went to Lincoln was where he really he took off when he was at Lincoln. And then, funnily enough, he had a loan spell at Borough before he ended up going to Borough permanently from Man City. So I'm trying to think where else he was. I'm sure he was somewhere else. He had a couple of loan stints in the Championship, but ended at Borough permanently, and then obviously started playing consistently. And that's when, you know, Villa snapped him up. But the thing is, with us, why it's a bit bitter is a lot of our youth setup moved across to Aston Villa. So we've lost a lot. Anyone that was kind of promising any staff that were promising within our youth setup were snaffled up by Aston Villa because, you know, they're bigger, better club in Europe now and all the rest of it. So anyone within our academy that they, you know, knew were decent, they were snapped up. They were snapped up, and they knew of Rodgers obviously from his time with us. And look, I don't hold anything against the lad because, like I said, it was Man City who, you know, we got a good fee for him at the time. He went to Man City. And, you know, I like to kind of tell people that, you know, he came from our academy, you know, and everyone's seeing him now doing what he's doing for Aston Villa. And I like him a lot. I just think he's almost a bit unconventional, isn't he? Like, you look at him, he's a big lad, and I wouldn't say he's like, I wouldn't say he's like very fast or like particularly skillful, but he's got great close control and seems to drop the shoulder and kind of breeze past players and you know, burst through the lines. And yeah, I enjoy watching him. I think he's a really exciting player. You know, it does pain me that he's obviously playing for Villa now, and he was within our ranks back in the day. But
I'm sorry, that was a dagger.
No, it's all right, mate. No, when I saw you say it, I thought it'd be interesting to see if they know he started with us or not. But yeah, I'm really chuffed for the lad, and you know, there's obviously since Carsley's come in, I wouldn't say any of the new additions into the squad have got me particularly excited, but I do like that one. I think he's had, a stellar start for Villa in the league. He's a really exciting player to watch. And, we're talking about, playing for England and, what we were discussing with Harry Kane saying stuff. I watched a bit of Rodgers' interview earlier, and you can tell he's absolutely blown away from the fact he's been called up, and he's potentially going to get some minutes for England. So, I'm pleased with that one. Chuff.
Connor, you watch a lot of Premier League. Morgan Rodgers, I kind of listened to him as well, and he was saying that when he was at Middlesbrough, Michael Carrick was saying that, the difference is stop. You need to not be a moments player. You need to be a player that sort of contributes week in, week out. And he seems to have gone on to that at Villa from last season. At this season, he seems to be playing more regularly, and he's a player that gets you off the edge of your seat.
He certainly does, yeah. And that is a fair assessment about the moments player thing. I suppose in some ways he'd have fit in just nicely in Gareth Southgate's Euros campaign there, because that was very much moments FC a lot of the time. So I'm sure he'd have enjoyed that. But no, listen, it's a great achievement for him, and I've seen him a few times for Villa, watched him play, and he's been brilliant. He's one of the core players in their team. I think that he just plays such a pivotal part. And yeah, you could argue he's a bit unconventional to a degree at times, but I think he's a smashing young player. And listen, when the day comes Villa decide to cash in on him, I mean, that will be a healthy sum of money. And not to rub it into Tom, but probably should have had a selling clause somewhere involved in that deal when he left. But no, I think he's, this is what I mean about when I said earlier, why can't you look at picking different players when you get such a pool of talent that England do? And because you're looking at some of the players in the team and you're thinking, how have they not had more caps than they do? I look at a Jared Bowen and go, how has he only had 12 caps? The guy's been absolutely enlightening for West Ham for the last few years, and he's only picked up 12 caps in that time. There's a couple of players in there who have been selected, been called up, but haven't actually played. So they've been in the camps without getting the caps as well, which you think, well, that's bizarre. But I do think that he's, Morgan Rodgers epitomises what the future could look like for England as well. Because I said that before, you need to know who's next, who's following Kane's footsteps when he goes, because he's probably 2 tournaments left. I also want to give a shout out to young Lewis Hall getting called up to the squad. Got to hit my Newcastle boys well, this. But delighted for him. The fact is, we've got 3 players in the squad this time, which is probably why Nick Pope isn't there, because you couldn't have 4 Geordies in there. That would just be insanity. But he's earned that as well, Lewis Hall. He has been really, really solid for us. He was one of these bizarre players last season that we had brought in for Chelsea, and then we had a real injury crisis, and he still wasn't getting played, and everybody was going, why are we not playing him? But it turned out there was some sort of clause in his contract that meant if we played him a certain amount of times, then we had to buy him. And I think at the time, we weren't sure whether we wanted to. And then I think Eddie Howe just decided, look, yeah, I want to buy him. I think we need to. I also need to use him because we literally are doing the bare bones. And he's done a terrific job since he came in. And then obviously you've got Tino Livramento in there as well. I think he'll be brilliant. And yes, I am disappointed that James Trafford is getting in over Nick Pope. That seems
criminal, man.
Strange decision, that one. James Trafford. I don't know what kind of.
There's better English goalkeepers than him in the Championship.
Yeah.
Let alone in the Premier League, mate. I'm not even just saying that. There's better English goalkeepers in the Championship than Trafford than the Premier League. That's a crazy one. I know he ain't going to get any start or anything like that, but some of the people he's got ahead of. No idea.
Well, you've got to say, probably part of that to drown out the noise of the fact that the only keeper, certainly in the last couple of camps, that would have had a sniff of being able to get a chance ahead of Pickford probably would have been Pope. And I'm not just saying as a Newcastle fan, I'm just saying when you look at the 3 keepers that went the last time and the time before that, this time out, barring a major injury to Pickford, there's no... Dean Henderson, I think, is a good goalkeeper and more than merits being in the squad. Trafford, I don't have anything against him, but I just don't know why you would put him in there. Other than it really just props up and solidifies nowhere, are they going apart from Jordan Pickford, which fair enough. But for me, Nick Pope, I think would just be a great guy to have in that camp, and he's again earned it. I mentioned earlier, Newcastle have hit form. Nick Pope's been a massive part of that with some of the contributions he's made. So, yeah, disappointed for Pope, but still happy that we've got 3 in there.
I'm sorry, Rob. I started talking goalkeepers, man, didn't I? And
come on,
it's like no, I was just saying with Connor, man. As soon as we start talking goalkeepers, it's like
straight in there, and he's straight in there. Listen, I do think Ramsdale has done okay for Southampton so far this season. I think he needed that move, and I think he's done okay. So, a shame that he's had to pull out. Just quickly then, tomorrow night, Tom, do you see them getting the result? You know, you said it's win or bust. You're not confident.
I'm not confident. You know, one, because of, like you said, how well Greece played. I know they you know, there was a part that was probably because of what had happened to Baldock, and, you know, they were kind of running high on emotions. But that win will have undoubtedly given loads of confidence to show, well, you know, if we get at them again, you know, especially at our place with the fans behind us, you know, we can cause another shock. And then number 2, because of what we've been talking about up to now, is, you know, the amount of players that have dropped out. You know, we're likely going to be taking on, you know, we lost to Greece last time round. We're going to be taking them on now with a weaker team, you know, in their backyard, you know, so it all kind of adds up to a really tough test. You know, it'll be an interesting game. You know, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, definitely a little bit nervous. I think that, you know, we're going to have to really dig deep and put in a performance to get the 3 points there.
Could be another Bernie Eccleston masterclass, couldn't it? Okay, then, Connor, let's come to you then. Scotland. Listen to John Carver. He seems to be doing a lot of media duties during this Nations League, and he was up talking to the media, I think it was yesterday, saying, look, we've not given up hope a second spot. You look at the group, Scotland rooted to the bottom with just 1 point in that draw against Portugal at Hampden, which caused Ronaldo to spit the dummy. We've got Croatia. And then, you know, the trip to Poland, we're going to need to get maximum points there to get that second place, and maybe need a favour from Portugal as well. You know, is it a kind of a half-attempted rallying cry, do you think? Or do you think he genuinely believes we can go on and get second? Because we've shown glimpses, I think. You know, I know it's been, you know, Steve Clarke's took a bit of a doing during this campaign, but I do think, you know, I sat and thought about it this afternoon when I was prepping for the show, and I kind of thought, you know what, there's been games, you know, away in Croatia, I thought we were fantastic. A couple of, you know, human error. And then you look at the Poland game at Hampden, again, human error. More so Tony Ralston than anyone else. But do you know what I mean? That we have been in games. You think about the performance away in Lisbon as well. I thought we were great for majority of that. And then the game at Hampden, which we know obviously we got the point from. So, you know, just long-winded, but do you think second is just too far gone now?
I think it's a huge ask. I think, is it impossible? No, but bear in mind that getting second won't just come down to points if they were to pull it off. You know, you need a couple of things to go right for you. So, for a start, you know, our goal difference right now, I believe, is still in a minus figure. I think is it -2 or -3.
-3.
You know, that's a turnaround in itself. And don't get me wrong, 1-2-0 against Croatia, all of a sudden you're pretty much level with them goal difference wise, and then you would assume Portugal would beat Poland. Assume that, but it isn't a guarantee. Then if they do, you'd be in a position where if you get a win and if Portugal beat Poland, then we'd be sitting on 4 points. Poland on 4 points and Croatia on 7. You still need some sort of favour for Portugal, because a point is all Croatia need to take it completely away from us anyway. And into the bargain, you know, if it was to go the other way and Poland beat Portugal and then we're on 4 in Croatia and Poland are on 4, the head-to-head is a big issue for us with Poland. We're at 3-2 win. So again, there's connotations where it's possible. I'm just not convinced. I think we can get a couple of wins. I'm not sure we can score enough goals or keep enough goals out at the back row to overturn any kind of goal difference deficit. I think third place is certainly possible, and I think the aim should be making sure you don't finish bottom. Go and try and beat Croatia and beat Poland, and at the very least solidify that you won't automatically go down. And then you look at a playoff against, is it B3 or something like that? We'd play.
I think it was Bulgaria and someone. It was two favourable sides.
Aye, it's certainly favourable anyway, and that would be
Lithuania and Bulgaria off memory, but I'll need to double check that.
Yeah, something like that. But as you say, it would be a favourable tie for us anyway. So why not? Why not fancy that and say let's get third? Because it's possible. I don't expect Poland to beat Portugal. I really don't. I think Portugal will beat them, and then as long as we beat Poland, even if we only get a point against Croatia, I'd be happy. For me, I'm looking for 4 points out of the next two games to at least keep ourselves in the playoff. If we can get more than that, happy days. But I admire the ambition of Steve Clarke. It just seems like an awful lot of things need to go right for that to happen.
I'll come back to you on putting goals in at the top end of the pitch. It's an interesting conversation and one I want to get your opinion on. But Tom, you've been quite nice, shall I say, for want of a better phrase, to Scotland, because you said in the last couple of pods we have been playing well in places, and what you've seen, you were kind of the calm head when me and Connor were quite scunnered at the results. But yeah, from what you've seen, do you think it's beyond Scotland to get that win tomorrow and take it into the last game?
No, not at all, mate. I think the only game I've not watched live from your last set of fixtures was the Croatia one, and then I caught up with the extended highlights of that. And every time I've watched you, mate, you've been well in the games, and I have been impressed with how well you've been competing. Like you said, it's just been kind of individual error, just a kind of slip of concentration, that has led to you kind of conceding goals and maybe not been not been as clinical enough at the other end. But I've not seen one game where I've just felt you're just kind of you're out of your league here. You're kind of well out your depth. You're just getting controlled. You're getting walked all over on. You've been in every game. You've had spells where you've been causing them problems. You've been threatening. The only one I think was the most disappointing was the game against Poland at home, where there were just such poor goals to concede, and you were in control for such long spells of the game. You really did kind of throw that one away. I think the other matches, though, you've been in the games and you've given a real good showing of yourselves. And the talk of there was obviously talk, and we had a few chats on the podcast about was it potentially time up for Clarke? I think he's done enough in the last few games to show that that's definitely not the case. That you need to stick with him. That there's definite progress here, and there's I really don't think you're that short of becoming a really decent international team that can mix it with the best. I've said it on a few times, and I said it after a few games. Like you're almost like a couple more McTominays or McGinns or Gilmore's. If you just had a couple more of that caliber of players in your starting 11, I think you'd have more points on the board.
We'd be winning World Cups, mate.
Mate, you'd definitely be seeing out a couple more of these matches than you have. It's been a bit of a shame because the guys that have let you down have perhaps been like I know we've kind of threw a bit of stick towards Grant Hanley. He's had a couple of errors. A guy who's at kind of the end towards the end of his career. Who's not starting regularly for a team in the Championship. These are the kind of guys you're having to kind of fill a few gaps with. Like I said, if you did have the caliber of the likes of McTominay or a couple more Robertsons or something like that, but I think that's the point I'm saying is you're not far off it, and I think if you can, find maybe a few gems as a few promising youngsters kind of are kind of getting talked up, and I think you're probably going to touch on one shortly. But if a couple of these guys can get a bit more experience within the international setup, start making a bit of a name for themselves, and you've got a couple of guys to come back. Ferguson's one of them. A lot of people getting excited about him, obviously getting back to fitness and being involved again. I think it's promising. I think I know you're rooted to the bottom, and you haven't picked up that many points, but from an outsider watching, I've been impressed. I have. Especially against Portugal. I think that's the big one for me, because I don't think Croatia and Poland are the team they once were. They're not as strong as they once were. But Portugal have still got a ridiculous squad. Even with Ronaldo where he is in his career, you look at the guys they still have in that squad, and they've got crazy depth. For you to have competed with them as well as you have over those matches.
Both games as well, not just
both games. Both games, home and away. You were well in the games. Obviously, you got the draw at Hampden, but you were very unlucky away from home. Final minutes of the game, final seconds. They've got the winners. Made it incredibly difficult for them. So, yeah, I think you can hold your heads up high, and I think Clark has definitely. This is just my take anyway. Has definitely done enough to show that he should be kept in the post, for another tournament at least. I think
you make a great point there about Clark. I was thinking of this afternoon. I think one thing you can guarantee with Scotland is we know what we're trying to do. We've got a style of play that we've built up under him. And I think I would give him the World Cup qualifiers where I maybe was unsure probably 6 weeks ago. Connor, I'll come to you because you were on about putting goals in the back of the net. Now we've got Shea Adams has pulled out. I think we'll be left with Dykes, Shankland, and Tommy Conway. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know that Stuart Armstrong's coming, but I wouldn't class him as a striker. Is this a chance, or in these two games, to go something different, or do you think he'll play Dykes? He's not been playing a lot of Birmingham. Tommy Conway's come on to a bit of a game at Middlesbrough in the last few weeks. What would you do?
Yeah, for me, looking purely based on form, I would Tommy Conway would probably have to be your starter. If you're going just on the form table right now, as you see, he's started to pick up, and you guys will know even more than me because you're more across the EFL than I am. I'm more of a casual fan of it. But even for that lens, he has started to pick up a bit of form at Middlesbrough of late, and I feel as if Lawrence Shankland right now isn't anywhere near the Lawrence Shankland that we've seen in the past, and certainly over the course of the last couple of years. Still, even with Neil Critchley coming in the door, still struggling a bit. Although his performances have marginally improved, he's still not scoring. And Lyndon Dykes obviously is the usual number one striker. Listen, the thing that I like about Lyndon Dykes, and I've always said this, I think his hold-up play is excellent. I think when you're looking for somebody to get you out a tight spot at the back, and you can just launch one up the park. He's got the strength and the ability to get in the end, hold it up, and allow play to move forward. Something that we've been critical of Shea Adams in the past for not doing as much of. And so I think again, in terms of bringing that part, he'll do that for you, and he'll get you a few goals as well. So I'd like us to start Tommy Conway, but I suspect probably will go with Lyndon Dykes and then maybe bring Conway or Shankland on later in the game. But it's an issue right now. When you look at it, there's one win from the last 12 games or something, I think it is. It is statistically the worst run of form Scotland have ever been on. And the performances, some of them have been very good. Again, Poland absolutely shot herself in the foot against Poland. 2-0 down in that game when we should never have been. And two silly penalties as well. Given away. I mean, I was very vocal that Grant Hanley should never don a Scotland jersey again after that nonsense. And then, similar with Portugal. In the first game, we played really well, and you don't expect to get anything from that kind of game, but we played so well. We got ourselves in front. We then did drop a little bit, I felt. But there was still one or two wee half chances we had, and it was just about could we keep the door closed at the back long enough to see out at least a point, and we didn't. So, yeah, there's been some positives to take from performances, but I do think Steve Clarke needs to get a win by hook or by crook in this break. For me, because this run cannot keep continuing and continue. We need to break the duck somewhere. And Croatia are a decent side, but I think they're a side we're capable of beating at Hampden.
Yeah, and I think we showed, in Zagreb that we can more than match them in places. Tom, does that actually feed into my point a little bit? Connor's saying there, Steve Clarke needs a result. He needs to do something to break this duck. So therefore, trying the same thing again, Lyndon Dykes up top, maybe stupidity. Why not go with Conway? I know you've suggested that he plays, with a 9 at his club, but he could be playing alongside his teammate in Ben Doak, who's also come onto a game as well. So a ridiculous stat on social media that he's only Vinicius Junior and Bradley Barcola at PSG have more carries into the penalty area than Ben Doak this season, who's only played 10 games. He's got 39. Vinicius Junior 44. He's level with Victor Gyökeres at Sporting, so it's a crazy number.
Yeah, I think 30 of them were against us at the Hawthorns, mate. He caused us all sorts of problems. I think that was one of his first starts as well, which was he's on fire at the minute. He's really starting to terrorise defences in the Championship, and I caught Middlesbrough's highlights from the weekend, and he was at it again. So yeah, he looks a real talent. I know you guys were talking him up, at in the summer, weren't you, in the tournament? And I'd never even heard of him, but yeah, there's plenty of people who have heard of him now. And
if I can just say, what I've noticed in the last few weeks, I don't know if you've seen it, Conor. I don't know how much you've seen of him at Middlesbrough. He seems to have bulked up. He seems to look a lot bigger. When he first came onto the scene, he was a slight wee fella. He's now got these kind of biceps and chest muscles. And whether that's something that Michael Carrick's doing is to try and bulk him up because you're going to be quite physical, on the wing for Middlesbrough. But he's definitely developing. Oh
yeah, whatever Carrick's doing, he's doing it right, because you're right. He bided his time with him for a little bit. He was getting a few appearances off the subs, but nothing much. And then all of a sudden, they've just kind of unleashed him, and he's getting better as each game passes. So you're right. You make a good point. From what I've seen, I think my guess would be that he'll go with Dykes because of, like what Conor said. His hold up play, and he's probably the best out of those players at kind of playing up top on your own, feeding off scraps, kind of battling and fighting and winning those flick-ons and just kind of causing a nuisance of yourself. But then, like you say, Rob, you make a good point in that, well, are you then making yourself a bit predictable, in terms of, the Croatians, in terms of what they're coming up against, and, how to defend against that. I'm a firm believer that I think, you should be always looking in your international teams, be looking to have players in there who are banging form, and they're doing it for their club side. And yeah, you're right. Conway and Doak are really on form at the minute for Middlesbrough. They're climbing up the table. They're scoring goals. He's assisting goals. So why not give him a game? I think that's probably, and you guys know obviously way more than me, but from what I've seen of Scotland, which is, I've watched quite a bit of you guys, since the summer when we started doing the page, is that he does err on the side of caution. He's very reluctant at times to kind of take a risk, and just kind of roll the dice a little bit. That would be maybe one criticism, from an observation I have. So, but it's good. Obviously, it's good for you guys to be having, players in your squad that are performing well. They're banging form, doing it for their club teams. And yeah, with Doak, I think you've got a player there who you can really start getting excited about. I think, obviously he plays for Liverpool. They're his parent club. They obviously know how good he could potentially be. But I think what I was talking about earlier in terms of getting, having a few more McTominays and McGinns and Gilmores, I don't think it'll be too long before he's kind of, in that category, because, he looks a real formidable player.
Conor, I just want to get your thoughts on the massive talk around Lennon Miller. It's the elephant in the room. It was a lot of talk whether he should have been in this squad, and then you start thinking, well, who at the expense of? You've got guys like, Callum McGregor, who's obviously, he's retired from international football, who'd have been straight in that midfield. You'd imagine it's probably the strongest area, you would think, of the Scotland national setup at the minute. Just twofold, really. Where can this guy go? He's got the world at his feet, and do you think he's got to bide his time? Eventually, he will be a mainstay in the Scotland side, or was it right just to get him in now, get him in around the likes of McTominay and Gilmore, like Tom was mentioned?
Yeah, it's a tough call to make. I think he's still for as good as he's been, and he has been tremendous. There's no doubt about that. He's a real gem in that Motherwell side. But it's easy to forget that along with all those performances, and then actually captaining Motherwell in the semi-final of the cup as well, it's easy to forget that he's still a young lad. He's still very young. And I think when you look at the wealthy experience that we've got, and particularly in that midfield, and you mentioned there, he's not going to get in ahead of a McTominay or, a McGinn who's just come back from injury. Ryan Gold, to be fair, has been doing well in the appearances he's made. The one thing I would say, though, is it's sort of. It's a bit of it. There's a bit of a contradiction for Steve Clarke in terms of why is he more willing to put, he gave Ben Doak an opportunity eventually, but he's not done that yet for Lennon Miller. Now, Lennon Miller has played basically a full season's worth of games at Motherwell. He's now into a second season of doing that and been brilliant. So he could have thrown him in there. I don't think anybody would have complained if he had Lennon Miller in that sheet and went, right, you know what? Or even when Che Adams had to pull out, instead of bringing in Stuart Armstrong, maybe he could have went, you know what? Let's just bring in Lennon Miller. Let's have him in amongst the camp and learning for his experience last, because it would benefit him as a player as well, no doubt. But then in saying that, there's a few players you could say might feel hard done by not to get in. I think particularly in that forward area, when Adams comes out, you almost think, well, could he not have brought a fourth striker in instead? Could he not have looked at Ryan Hardy, for example, who we've mentioned a few times, never seems to get any kind of look in. Kevin Nisbet's only just came back for Aberdeen, but to be fair to him,
scored last week.
Seems to have hit the ground running, so he's another one who'll probably feel a little bit hard done by not to get that last minute call with the pull out. So yeah, there's a number of players you could point at. I think we'll see Lennon Miller sooner rather than later in a Scotland jersey. And it's not just him, by the way. You've got others in there you can look at too. You've got Lyle Cameron, who plays with Lennon Miller in that under-21 setup in the midfield. Many others. Luke McCowan, he's another one you could look at as a future possibility as well. So it's promising when you look at certainly midfield options from a youngster's point of view, and I'm sure Steve Clarke's got an eye on that, but right now he's went for experience, and I think, cut a long story short, the position we're in, I think experience was always going to win the day in this camp.
Yeah, I think you have to agree. Just finally on Lennon Miller, because me and Tom spoke about something today, just between ourselves and a chat, and I wanted to bring it up tonight because I think it's quite a topical point, and Conor, I want to bring you in on this. So, like, one thing you can't question is Lennon Miller's mentality. No under-21 squad this time around. And he insisted on going down and playing for the 19s. He's played tonight, or this afternoon, should say, in a narrow defeat against Wales. He could have easily just said, no, I'll rest, I'll take the time off. Not done that. Rumours circulating today, Celtic are subject to a 5.3 million bid in January with add-ons that could go up to 6 million and loan him back in January. Tom, you were of the mindset that maybe going to Celtic wasn't the right move for him. You kind of said that he should be looking to move down south and test himself down there.
Well, yeah, it was just the other reason with Celtic is obviously they splashed a bit of cash, didn't they, in the last window? I know you were saying they were going to loan him, looking to potentially loan him back to Motherwell for the remainder of the season. But even the following season, you look at the guys that they brought in the summer and the guys that they've already got in his position. What's his chances of consistent game time going to be at Celtic? Maybe Rangers sounds like there's probably more of an opportunity at Rangers for him to get consistent game time. But yeah, it was more of just a kind of bit of a throw a bit of a debate in there that Celtic and Rangers, for many a year now, any kind of promising youngster that kind of emerges at the likes of Motherwell or the Dundee teams or Hibs or Hearts, that they seem to more times than not get snapped up by either yourselves or Celtic, and it was just a bit of a question really. Do you think that is playing any sort of part in terms of your international team and the quality levels there? And I was just obviously stating some of your better players are the guys who have played south of the border or gone and played abroad. It was just to get your take really and see what you felt about that.
He's been much more sheepish than he was when he was talking to me directly.
I'm only wanting us to sign him, mate, because from everything you've told me, everything you've told me, and everything everything I've seen so far, I've not seen much of him, but I've seen a few kind of highlight reels, and I've seen plenty of people talking about him.
I can tell you right now, Robert, I think we both know at least one person who will be absolutely spitting feathers if in January it's announced that Lennon Miller has signed for Celtic and he goes back and won to Motherwell. That will be... I mean, listen, I think personally, going to Celtic right now, the only way it works is if he gets loaned back to Motherwell. But then, why not? If you're Motherwell, why not just keep your powder dry for a bit longer and say, well, hold on a minute here. If they're willing to spend 5.3 million just now and then loan him back to us, well, why not cut out the middleman? And I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll keep him in our books, even though that's a lot of money for Motherwell, but we'll keep him in our books because if he keeps playing well and doing what he's doing, by the summer...
He's definitely going somewhere, isn't he?
By the summer he's going somewhere, and if they want him, well, they've just offered us that, so we can say, well, actually, he's now even done even more this season, so we want an extra couple $100,000, please. Would they quite time to do that?
I go one further. Motherwell have got a new chairman in. If he's smart, I would offer Lennon Miller the best contract you can. Protect the asset because, look, he's going to go somewhere. I think what you both say, I don't know if the right time to move to Celtic is now because Arne Engels, Paulo Bernardo, Callum McGregor's shown no signs of letting up. They'll get rid of Hatate as well. He may eventually move on.
Well, you've talked about that Luke McCowan as well because that's he was obviously Dundee's captain, their star man, and he's gone to Celtic and he's not getting many minutes, is he? He's not playing consistently. He's not playing consistently as he was as before. And I know obviously he's a bit later on in his career than Miller, but that's the kind of point I'm making is that they're already spoilt for choice.
He's not in terms of McCowan, to be fair to him, because you're right, he's not had many minutes, but he has made an impact on the few games
he's grabbed his chance, hasn't he?
And that's certainly what Lennon Miller will need to do, but it's a massive gamble because my concern is I look at a player like Lennon Miller, and when this kind of talk comes up, I've seen this rodeo before. We all have, where these promising young lads, young Scottish lads in particular, are doing well at Motherwell or Dundee United or Aberdeen's or whatever, and they go to Celtic or Rangers and it finishes them. They don't recover. Look at Scott Allen, how well was he playing for him? He was the future once, went to Celtic and they left him to rot on the bench. Pointless. Jake Hastie as well, another one. Clearly left Motherwell too early. Rangers signed him at the time. Let's be honest here, even as Rangers fans, Rangers signed him at the time purely because Celtic had signed David Turnbull. And it was the two of them that came up together. And they went, right, well, they're having Turnbull, we'll have him instead. And, the list goes on. Gary Mackay-Stevens, another one. Phenomenal player at Dundee United. That group of players that Celtic soaked up for Dundee United were a genuine threat. By the way,
he was a Gary Mackay-Stevens fanboy at one point, I remember.
It was him and Stuart Armstrong, wasn't it, Dundee? I remember
him,
tearing it
Stuart
up.
Armstrong and Nadir Chifti, who all left sort of basically in the one swoop to Celtic.
That's the thing. Like Rob knows. There has been seasons where, but I've always kept a keen eye on the SPL, and I remember those two, Mackay-Stevens and Armstrong for Dundee, and Dundee, having a really promising season, and then Celtic going, all right, we like it, lucky yous too. Bang, let's have you both. One of them obviously turned out to be a star for him, the other didn't. But that's kind of like the mindset of them. It's just like, well, anyone that shows a bit of promise, a bit of potential, we're just gonna snap them up. It's almost as if it's sometimes like to stop the other one, to stop Rangers getting hold of him. We'll just have him, and and that's just from looking from the outside in. Like, I just think sometimes these guys always a lot of them end up at Celtic or Rangers, and I just think, is there not any other teams kind of keeping an eye on these guys, because obviously got talent and obviously got potential. Is it the pull of the teams? Because a lot of, more times than not, they always start their interviews with, oh, my dad or, my uncle or someone supports the club and moving to them. And, that always seems to play a big factor, is, supporting one of these teams. And
yeah, because the problem is, for every Stuart Armstrong, there's probably 3 or 4 Gary Mackay-Stevens that have came beforehand. That's the rare breed, that's the standout. Or an Andy Robertson, for example, but what Andy Robertson done that was different to those other guys, and I think plays into a point that you're kind of alluding to. Actually, Andy Robertson backed himself, and instead of going to Celtic or Rangers, he went down south. He went from Queen's Park to Dundee United. Then he's down south playing for, was it Hull or something like that?
Hull, yeah, he went to Hull.
Signed on the same day as Harry Maguire, I believe.
Yeah. And what a success! And I can tell you right now who the better player is. You know what I mean? It's that is of massive value as well for those players. It's about that balance. I think Lennon Miller's someone who, as I say, I think you're right, Robert, spot on. That new chairman, get him nailed down as fast as you can on our contract. Even do it more cheekily and say, look, Lennon, I'm not expecting you to stay for the next 3 years, but it's going to be financially good for me and for you to get this deal done, and then keep him to the summer. And if I'm Lennon Miller, I would have a serious conversation about whether I go to one of the Old Firm or whether I go down south. But either way, it's going to be massive money for Motherwell.
Well, just as well, like, he's playing week in, week out. He got the armband, didn't he, for him in the cup semi-final. I just think sometimes, like you said, I know Celtic can offer a lot more in terms of weekly wages to the lad than Motherwell can, but he's only a young lad. He's got a lot of football still ahead of him. I think I think you two are right. Just kind of keep your head down, playing first team football. A good standard. Keep making a name for yourself, and before long, it won't just be Celtic and Rangers that come calling. There'll be other teams interested as well, won't there? And you're kind of picking from a bigger pool, then, aren't you? So I don't know.
To be fair, just to draw a line under it in terms of he's definitely going to move on, whether it's the Old Firm, whether it's down south. There's also talk of Atalanta in Italy having a sniff as well. So the boys got options, and whether it's in January, the summer. I just think, the key for me, whether it was him or his father, I know his father's quite involved. Lee Miller, who you'll know, Tom, he played at Middlesbrough, and we know obviously played up at a whole plethora of clubs up in Scotland. He'll be sort of guiding him. I'd just be saying, you want to go somewhere where you're going to be playing. You don't want to go somewhere where you're going to get lost, because you've got all that momentum behind you now. 50 odd games at 18, captain's armband, you say, cup semi-final. So it's about balancing it up. So yeah, it's certainly interesting to watch that one develop. I know we've gone over, but there's just a couple of bits of stuff that we did want to talk about while they're quite relative. So the first one is obviously referee David Coote. He's got a wry smile and he rolled his eyes. If you haven't seen it, then where have you been? The video circulated of David Coote sitting comfortably in an armchair with a friend, talking about how much I don't know if I can say the word, he doesn't like Jurgen Klopp and doesn't like Liverpool. So let's go into it seriously then, lads, if we can. I'll come to you first then, Connor. Has he brought the game into disrepute for you in any way, shape or form?
Well, the thing is, I had a fairly clear opinion of this until about an hour and a half ago.
Tell the viewers what happened an hour and a half ago if they haven't seen it.
A further video has been released and that purports, and I will say purports to, allegedly shows David Coote, having a sniff, shall we say, having a snort, apparently during the Euros. Now, look, I said before I come on to the lads, and I'll be very open and honest, I am kind of wanting to see a bit more evidence in that one, particularly purely because the angle when you watch the video, it's not 100% concrete that you could say, yeah, that's David Coote. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you just watched that video in isolation, you didn't know who David Coote was and put him in a lineup, I'm not sure you could identify that it was him. So more remains to be seen in that. But in terms of the first video, which is the more important one for this purpose, I don't know that he brought the game into disrepute. I personally think everybody has got an opinion. Every referee will have that opinion as well, because they're human beings. You don't have to like people. You don't have to like certain clubs. And if you're somebody like David Coote, who's a referee, and you go to a place like Anfield and you've had abuse hurled at you non-stop, constantly by the fans, and you've had how many times we've seen, I don't know what's happened with Tom's camera there, but how many times we've seen that, Jurgen Klopp is a very animated manager on the touchline. We've seen him in the ear, in the face of the fourth officials quite often, and the referees. That's something he has done. And I think, it's understandable that he feels that way. Where he's gone wrong is, why on earth has he allowed himself to be filmed? Why have you allowed yourself to? Because you hear him say at the end of it, this video can't go anywhere. Well, don't allow yourself to be filmed in the first place. It's madness, As I say, do I agree with, the verbiage that he's used and how he's described it? No, it's a bit harsh and a bit over the top. But he absolutely has the right to have an opinion that he doesn't like Liverpool and he doesn't like Jurgen Klopp. The issue is that should never be made public. And now that it is, I don't see a way back for him in terms of refereeing in the Premier League. That being said, I don't think his career as a referee should be totally over. Because, yes, people might question, there's this decision. But if you put him in the Championship or League One or whatever, for talking's sake, right? He hasn't said anything bad about Plymouth, about West Brom, about teams like that, or Swindon Town. So you could wrap his knuckles, you could suspend him for the remainder of this season, and then in the summer, review it, train him up more and say, look, you will be demoted, you're going to have to start again from wherever, and give him that second chance. Now, this is all in the light of not knowing the details fully about this second video, which probably will be the nail that finishes him off. But
I was going to say,
because I don't believe in cancel culture. You shouldn't lose your job for saying you don't like somebody.
No, as you say, the first video doesn't want to me that's a career ender, but the second one,
yeah,
like, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It insinuates drug taking. Now, if that's the case, I don't know what the standard is in terms of drug testing for match officials as it is for players. I don't know if it's as stringent. And there was also sort of, listen, the lad's entitled to have a good time and go on holiday. There was also images of him in Malaysia, whether there was drugs. I don't know if that video is surfaced from his trip there. So there's more to come from this. But Tom, it could go one of two ways. As Connor says there, either, he's repentant if there is drug abuse involved, gets the help that he needs, and then comes back and starts refereeing games again. Or it goes the other way. He's not repentant, and next year we see him on Strictly Come Dancing. No, but that's the way it'll go, isn't it? That's the way it'll go.
Yeah.
Celebrity and Big Brother and all that kind of stuff.
I know, yeah. Well, look, I think I agree with everything Connor said there. And look, I think even if it is in with the drugs, there's been footballers, haven't there, who've had difficulties with drugs. They've obviously had to serve a ban of sorts, and then they've been rehabilitated and they've come back. I think you're spot on in saying that I think he's not going to be able to referee in the Premier League anymore, because as much as he is entitled to an opinion, I just think, it comes with the job. It comes with the territory that you have to keep those opinions to yourself. You have to do everything in your power to keep those opinions to yourself and make sure that they do not come out into the public realm. And unfortunately, that's happened for him. Everything now, any mistake or any kind of 50-50 decision that he makes now, he'll just get absolutely torn to shreds, and there'll be all sorts of accusations, conspiracy theories. They've already begun. Everyone's already looking back at the decisions he made over the last few seasons that have gone against Liverpool, that went in potential favour of Man City, that's then won them the league. I know, Connor, I agree with everything that you're saying. I think it's absolute nonsense. But I think I'm just saying it now. I'll be absolutely astonished if he refs in the Premier League again. I honestly think it'll be.
There was an insinuation. I don't know if you saw Danny Simpson on Under the Cosh. He told a story, didn't name the referee, about he was playing in the game, made a tackle, and the referee said to him, "I should have sent you off there, but I want you to beat these." And there's an insinuation that referee was David Coote. Now, as I say, these things are going to grow arms and legs now.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't know the guy. I've only seen 30 seconds of him. I think he's been done dirty by his so-called former friend on that sofa. But you have to learn, and if you're in these positions, that you probably don't want cameras around when you're sort of enjoying yourself. So,
Well, by the way, his so-called friend has got all to answer for as well, and he should not, just because he's not a particularly famous person or a referee, he shouldn't just skate on this either, because, from what we've read in the papers, and I do stress that it was the Mail that said it, so, take it with a pinch of salt, but he has reportedly been suspended from his employment as well, pending an investigation into this, because there's obviously allegations around him swabbling and his conduct. But the ultimate thing for me is it's perception is everything, and if you're perceived in a certain way to be biased, we know it, Robert. Every time John Beaton, Bobby Mann, referee a Rangers game, there are certain quarters who think that shouldn't happen because the perception of those guys, which it isn't necessarily fair, because I've always said, and it always listen, I've probably been guilty of myself when a decision goes against my team, but genuinely look at any referee and you could point out, I bet you could point out 10 bad decisions that David Coote has made that have went against Liverpool, and you could probably point out 10 bad decisions he's made that have either been in Liverpool's favour or have helped them out, i.e. a decision against City or something. It's, you can't prove in any way, shape or form David Coote has influenced the outcome of a game intentionally with decision making.
It's been levelled at Michael Oliver for Manchester City that he's been gone out to Saudi and refereed games that's been owned by the same owner and stuff like that. So there's been tedious links there as well. So it's something that the referees will never get away with. But to come out and be recorded saying stuff is just unfortunate, for want of a better phrase. But okay, listen, very last, because I'm aware of time, and we've been on for nearly 90 minutes, so we've nearly done a full game here. Conor wanted obviously to mention the Gary Lineker match of the day stuff. I'm sure he said he's retiring before. This isn't the first time this has happened, but he stayed on. Jermaine Genius must be somewhere kicking himself that he was sending pictures of his walloper to people. He'd have got that gig, wouldn't he? He would have absolutely got that gig. But who takes over? A lot of talk about Mark Chapman. He's done Match Day 2 for a number of years. Quite a decent presenter. I think he's been on radio since the early 2000s. And it would look like a natural sort of step up. I'm slightly concerned, just slightly concerned, that it may be a BBC tick box and we may end up with a female presenter. Nothing wrong with that, by the way, but I just think that, I don't think the masses would enjoy that as much as maybe a Chappers. What's your guys' take? Conor, we'll start with you because you brought it up.
Yeah, I think what they probably should do, firstly, in terms of Gary Lineker, best of luck to him, whatever he does. He's got his podcasting empire, that is sitting there ready for him. He does the rest of his football, he owns the rest of his politics and all that.
Well. He's been an absolute institution.
Yeah, he has. And listen, Gary Lineker has been, for some people, controversial because he's had political opinions. But, to be fair to Gary Lineker has, and because you always get this nonsense about wage packets and stuff and what he gets. I really don't care about Gary Lineker's wage. I couldn't care less about it. There's also a factor that he's technically never been an employee of the BBC. He's always been freelance because he's done loads of other stuff. He worked for BT in the beginning stages there for the Champions League. We might see him pop up. If I was Sky Sports, I'd certainly be having a look at seeing if we can get him in on occasion to do stuff with him. I think in terms of Match of the Day, if I was the BBC, for me, the obvious choice is Chappers. You've got to give it to Mark Chapman. If he wants it, that is, because we don't know, but I assume he does, because he still does Match of the Day too. And then if you want to shift the dials about a bit, put Mark Chapman in your main show, Match of the Day. And even if you want to have Alex Scott part of it, then there's no reason you couldn't have a host Match of the Day too. I always think Match of the Day too, because it's usually the lesser programme, should be used by the BBC as that ground to say, right, we'll put whoever we think could in the future take over the main show on Match of the Day too. Because bear in mind, Gary Lineker came in, he replaced Des Lynam 25 years ago. There was no such thing as Match of the Day too then. You had to come into the main vehicle. So I just think the smart thing would be Chapman in match of the day, Alex Scott, if that's what they want to do, or somebody else on a match of the day too. I can't see any reason not to do that. Other than, as you say, the potential for a tick box exercise, just to say we now have, because they were accused of that with Football Focus really when they done that, which I disagreed with there. I didn't have any problem with that, but again, I am the last person who would have any issue with female pundits or hosts, and I don't agree with a lot of the stick that they get, but I think for me, it doesn't make sense you wouldn't go with Mark Chapman. He's your most experienced hat you've got, and he's a tremendous presenter, by the way.
Tom, would you go along with that? Mark Chapman for the post?
Yeah, I agree with all what Connor said. Look, I like Alex Scott. I think she's good, but I think the BBC have got to be careful, because I know Football Focus has taken a hit, hasn't it? It's taken a big hit in terms of its viewers. I don't think that's anything to do with her, but I think it's a tough one, because I think there's still a large proportion, like you're saying, Connor. I'm exactly the same as you. I do not care. There's some absolutely fantastic female pundits now, on Sky Sports and on the BBC as well, which I enjoy listening to their opinion and commentating on games. But I think there's still a large proportion of football fans out there who've got an issue with a woman kind of leading the way on a show such as Football Focus or Match of the Day 2 or Match of the Day. And I think the BBC will have to be careful, because I think if they were to go with Alex Scott, I think they could see a big hit in terms of viewing numbers. But like I said, I think she's good. I think she's solid at what she does. But I think you make a great point now. I think if you were looking to bring Alex Scott into it with a bit more prominent role, why not give her Match of the Day 2 and Chapman Match of the Day? Because I just think he just ticks all the boxes, doesn't he? Really, but regardless of whether he's a male or female, I just think he's been doing it a lot longer. He's just more knowledgeable, and he's got
his craft a lot more, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He's like Lineker. He was obviously a bit behind the ears when he first come into it.
Big ears as well.
Well, big ears, mate, big ears. But yeah, I think it's just. But I think I was just having a quick look then. I think Scott's the bookie's favourite. I think it's pretty much a done deal from some of the things that I've been seeing on social media.
Would it not be a worry, though, as a question to use to actually just as we wrap up, right? You see, if they'd done it that way and Alex Scott took over Match of the Day, Mark Chapman's still going to host Match of the Day too, because that's what he's been doing for years. And now, what's to stop, if that puts people off watching the main show on a Saturday, you get all the goals for Saturday and a Sunday anyway. So, as they're not wouldn't surely, logically, they would look at that and say, well, what's to stop our viewers plummeting on a Saturday and people going, well, tell you what, I'll just wait till Sunday and I'll watch when Chapel goes on, because I can see the goals then anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's nothing against Alex Scott, because I agree with Tom. I think she's fine. But, I worry having somebody like Mark Chapman sitting behind Alex Scott almost is not a good look for you, and could cause a problem in terms of your viewers shifting fully to the Sunday and having less than the Saturday, which you don't want.
I'll give you a little insight into my view, and I always watch Match of the Day on a Sunday morning, cup of tea, maybe a wee donut. But I never watch the analysis. I just watch the game and then I fast forward on to the next game. I don't watch the talking in between. I just watch the game. So it probably makes no odds to me who's hosting. However,
sorry to interrupt, Rob, but this is the point I'm making, is that I think it's Match of the Day is even though it is an institution, it's been going on for years and years and years, and it's this kind of BBC headliner, it has been for a long time now. I do think, in terms of people watching it, viewing figures, they're always going down and down, because, the likes of BT Sport and Sky Sports and what they offer nowadays. So that's why I'm saying I think it's even more important that they get this decision right for viewing reasons, and not just because of a box ticking exercise, because I think it could end disastrously for them if they don't make the right pick.
it's not a betting market I'm going to get involved in. Okay then, lads, that is an absolutely brilliant shift, I must say. Thoroughly enjoyed it. People have been dipping in and out of a couple of views as we've gone along, so hopefully they'll leave us a comment or feed into it. There will be plenty of stuff through the week. Drop them on X. So it's my thanks to Tom, my thanks to Connor, and we'll see you on the other side. Cheers.